Hello again, and welcome to our video on the new legal requirements for landlords' inspections. With the introduction of this new regulation, there are new opportunities for electricians to help landlords to meet the mandatory requirements of health and safety law. A good electrician offering a good service will find many years of repeat business with this new regulation. This video will cover the obligations of the new regulation and also cover the key points of the electrical certificates that landlords should be looking at to ensure compliance with the law. It has been put together from the viewpoint of both the electrician and the landlord. From April the 1st, 2021, a new regulation will apply to all occupied rental property in the private rental sector. Currently, there are around 5 million privately owned rented properties in the UK. Questions that we might ask include: who does it apply to, and what must the landlords do? What certificates must the electrician complete? What certificates must the tenant have a copy of? How to understand the EICR, what it means, and what about cost and time? The new regulation is called the Electrical Safety Standards in the Private Rented Sector, England, Regulations 2020. It is a mandatory requirement, and on April the 1st, 2021, all new and existing private tenancies in England will be affected. Previously, only HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy, were required to have electrical safety inspections. Now, all privately rented property that is occupied is included, with very few exceptions. In Scotland, there is already a mandatory requirement to inspect and test rented property, which is the Housing Act 2014. The purpose of the regulation is to ensure that the electrical condition of the property is checked at regular intervals so as to protect the occupants from the effects and danger of electrical faults, to ensure that the property is electrically sound and safe for continued occupancy, and to prevent the danger of fire from electrical faults. Landlords and letting agencies will have certain mandatory duties imposed upon them, and these will include ensuring that every electrical installation in the affected premises is inspected and tested at regular intervals. These intervals must not exceed 5 years and must be carried out by a qualified and competent person. A property that does not already have a current in-date electrical certificate must have an inspection and test report completed before the 1st of April 2021. The landlord will receive an electrical certificate from the electrician, which will be composed of several pages. The landlord must, within 28 days of the date on the certificate, give a copy of these certificates to each household in the rented property. If the local housing authority requests a copy of the certificates, then these must be supplied within 7 days of the request. There are fines of up to £30,000 for not complying with the regulation. The landlord must also keep a copy of all certificates until the next inspection, when these should be made available to the person carrying out the inspection. There are a few exceptions. The regulation does not apply if you are a private registered provider of social housing, if the tenant shares the accommodation with the landlord or a member of the landlord's family, if the tenancy agreement gives right of occupation that exceeds 7 years, and student accommodation, refuges, care homes and similar healthcare buildings. So, what must be done to comply with the regulation? Arrange for an electrical inspection and test of the rental property every 5 years. Ensure that this is carried out by a competent registered electrician. Confirm by having the inspection and test done that the property is electrically safe and free from defects that might affect the health and safety of the occupants and their visitors. If the outcome of the inspection and test is unsatisfactory, then the landlord must take prompt and appropriate steps to remedy the situation. There are three types of electrical certificate: an EICR, Electrical Installation Condition Report, an EIC, an Electrical Installation Certificate, and an MEIWC, often shortened to MWC, a Minor Works Certificate. The first type of certificate is the EICR, or Electrical Installation Condition Report, and most times this will be the appropriate certificate. It is used for an existing installation, and the installation will need to be retested every 5 years or sooner and a new EICR completed. Some certificates will have been completed before the date of the new regulation and will have been dated for 10 years from the date of inspection. The government has declared that this 10-year period is no longer appropriate. From the 1st of April 2021, all 10-year certificates that have been issued for rented property will now only be valid for 5 years from the date of the original test. The next certificate is an EIC, or Electrical Installation Certificate. It is used for a new build, a rewire, or a new installation. New builds and rewires will have an EIC issued, as they are new circuits and should be perfect. An Electrical Installation Certificate should only be issued when all remedial work is complete. There should not be any defects or issues left to do. For rental property, the EIC, or Electrical Installation Certificate, will be valid for 5 years, even if the electrician has recommended 10 years. After 5 years, the property should be inspected and tested and an EICR supplied. The third certificate is a Minor Works Certificate, or to give it its full title, a Minor Electrical Installation Works Certificate. When works are carried out to repair an identified defect, a Minor Works Certificate will be issued when the work is completed. One Minor Works Certificate is issued for each circuit that has a defect or defects. Depending on the severity of the defect, larger remedial works may require an EIC instead. There are certain key points that a landlord or letting agency should pay attention to on an electrical installation condition report, and we will discuss these on the next few slides. An EICR is issued to the person ordering the work, and this is usually the landlord or letting agency. The EICR is issued regardless of the condition of the electrical installation and is marked as either satisfactory or unsatisfactory. An unsatisfactory installation may continue to be used, subject to remedial works being planned and adequate precautions taken for the defective items. These precautions might mean the isolation of certain circuits that are deemed unsafe with imminent danger present. The electrical report is specific to that property, so the landlord and the electrician should ensure that certain details are correct. The address of the installation and details of the installation must be correct. The name of the person who requested the work and why. Written details of agreed limitations with the client, but as much as possible should be inspected and tested. Agree what cannot be tested, floorboards and panels not being removed, for example, access to the loft and other spaces, etc. Do not skip tests just to save time. As much as reasonably possible must be done. This is the first page of an EICR, and it is quite clear where these details are inserted. The electrician will list any issues in the observation section and assign a condition code C1, C2, C3, depending on the severity of the issue. C1 is immediately dangerous, exposed live wires, for example. C2 is possible danger. It might be the wrong size breaker or no RCD fitted. C3 is for improvement recommended. One example would be that the consumer unit is an older plastic type, as we now install metal consumer units. There is no need to change it if it still functions correctly, but the electrician has a duty to tell you that other types are available. Where the inspection test still leaves some things unanswered, an FI code for further investigation is used. This might be a cable that disappears into a wall cavity but cannot then be traced. Any C1 or C2 condition code will automatically be an unsatisfactory report. The red box on this slide shows the section where the electrician will mark the report as satisfactory or not. Below that in blue circles is the confirmation that any C1 or C2 is unsatisfactory. And in a purple circle is a note that any FI must be investigated urgently. On the second page of the EICR will be found the observations section. The electrician will complete a line for each defect found and must insert a condition code for each entry. We have put some examples onto the slide that would trigger an unsatisfactory report. At the bottom of the EICR is a list of the condition codes and the severity assigned to each. We have added 2 more examples of defects found. The FI code has been used because a cable cannot be traced and further investigation work may be necessary before it can be deemed safe or not. And there is a C3 entry regarding the consumer unit. C3s are not fails, they are just advisory. The EICR is 2 sheets of paper. In addition, the client should receive a schedule of inspections, which is another 2 sheets, and they should also be given a schedule of tests, which is at least 1 sheet, possibly 2 or more if the consumer unit has many circuits. An EICR is not valid without the schedule of inspections and schedule of test results being attached. This means that the landlord should receive at least 5 sheets of paper from the electrician. It is the landlord's responsibility to make copies of these certificates and to hand a set to each household in the property. Let's look at how we deal with remedial work. If the property is deemed as unsatisfactory, the new regulations state that the remedial work to correct the situation must be carried out within 28 days from the date of issue of the electrical report. For a new build, the EIC or electrical installation certificate should not be issued until all defects are corrected. The law says that if a tenant or visitor receives an injury or electric shock because of an electrical fault, the landlord could be held liable if they knew the fault existed but failed to act. All remedial work should be carried out by a competent person and an electrical certificate issued for each defect that was identified in the observation section of the EICR. It will normally be a minor works certificate that is issued. Note that remedial work is not part of the inspection and test contract. This is additional work that should be agreed upon between the electrician and the client. When all the defects are corrected and they all have a minor works or other certificate to this effect, then the EICR will automatically change from unsatisfactory to satisfactory. There is no need to have the inspection test carried out again. The minor works certificates are evidence of corrective actions having been completed. Keep the EICR and all the minor works certificates together, and this should satisfy the requirements of the regulation for the next 5 years. An often asked question is what work is involved and what will it cost? Every property is different, but with any inspection and test, it will be absolutely necessary to turn off the electricity to the whole installation at some point. Circuits will need to have cables removed in order to carry out essential tests. A certain amount of sockets and lights must be dismantled to check for tightness of connections, check for overheating and other hidden problems. The electrician will need access to all parts of the installation, including the meter intake position, the consumer unit and the loft areas, basements, garages, etc. Identifying the defects is part of the inspection and test process. The cost and time for any remedial work should be separately negotiated. A 3-bedroom house, as an example, to do the work correctly and competently, should take a good electrician around 4 or 6 hours to carry out the work and a further hour or 2 to complete the certificates. A full inspection and test to comply with the regulations cannot be completed in an hour, and it cannot be done without turning the power off. Prices for an inspection and test will vary around the country, but as a guide, for a 3-bedroom house, expect to pay a few £100s. Most electricians are reasonable on their pricing structure, but do be aware of aggressive overpricing. And if there is a third party involved that is arranging the inspections for you, be conscious of their markup for scheduling the inspection and test for you. There is no harm in seeking a second or third quote if you wish. Always agree a price before agreeing to the work. This works for the electrician and it works for the landlord. Always use an electrician who is fully competent at this sort of work. Ideally, they will be registered with one of the main electrical scheme providers. All registered electricians will have a photo ID registration card on their person, and they will not object to you asking to see it. We hope that you found this video from Learn Electrics both useful and enjoyable. Please click on the like button below, and by clicking on subscribe you will also have access to all of our Tech Tips videos, and you will also ensure that you don't miss our next weekly video. Clicking on subscribe also helps us too. We do appreciate it, and it does make us feel that all our effort is worthwhile. Typing in Learn Electrics, all one word, into the YouTube search bar will also give you access to all the videos. We also have Tech Tips articles on our website, which can be found at www.learnelectrics.com. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again very soon.